Hello everybody and welcome to our fourth LiveCode Q&A session. We'll just give it a few minutes, see if anybody else joins us. I don't have much prepared for today because I didn't have much in the way of questions. If you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat and we can discuss them. Otherwise, what I thought I would do in this session is just have a look at some of the fundamentals of LiveCode. So the sort of the basics of a stack, the messages that you'll use the most, and maybe some of the widgets and controls and how to use the sort of the most basic functionality of LiveCode. And then we can just do that. And while we're looking at those things, then any questions that come into the chat, we'll have a look at those as they come in. So we've got one question, so I'm just going to read that now, but I'll wait until we've got a few more people here before we actually start answering any of the questions. Hello to Kelly in Canada and Devon in Michigan. It's nice to hear from you all. I'm always impressed by how much of the globe we managed to cover in these. I think we're slightly out of the time zone for certain parts, but sort of Western Europe and the Americas do quite well. Okay, so we're getting a few questions, so some nice things to have a look at. Okay, so we're getting some good questions here, and we'll just give it another couple of minutes since we're just after, well, 5 here, whatever time it is where you are. But certainly a data grid question there that we can have a look at. An RSS question, which we do have a lesson on that, so let me see if I can find that and share it with you. But basically we do have an XML parsing library that you can use for the RSS, but I'm pretty sure we've got a lesson particularly on that with an example. Let me see if I can find that and then I can share that with you. Either a lesson or it's one of the example stacks. Okay, so there's definitely some chat about it on the forum, but I'm sure we've got an actual example somewhere. Yes, and JSON libraries. We do have a JSON library that comes as part of LiveCode, so we can certainly have a look at that as well. Good questions, guys. Might not have to talk about the things I thought about talking about at all. Right, so I can't find the RSS example that I wanted to show you. I vaguely remember that the RSS feed we were using for the example was taken down, and maybe we just got rid of the lesson because it wasn't working anymore. But I'm sure we've got something. Okay, well, we've got a good few questions here that we can get started with. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so let's start with the nice easy ones. So Peter asked about, on his Windows system, he always saves his stack using file save, and then when he closes the stack, it asks him if he wants to save. The stack will be saved. I think that this has been reported before. I think this is just an issue with LiveCode deciding whether the stack has changed since the last time you saved it or not. If you have saved your stack using file save or command save or control S as a shortcut, then it definitely will be saved. So if it asks you, it's just for some reason the sort of, we call it the dirty flag, is maybe being set incorrectly. So it should have saved everything, so you probably shouldn't. You could click no at that point. I think that is just a little glitch in LiveCode where it's not correctly deciding if something needs to be saved or not. Okay, so what is next? Oh, David might have found the lesson that I was looking for. So what I was doing was I was just looking at our lessons portal. I'm sure everybody has had a look at this by now, but it's a good place. We've got lots of lessons in here, step-by-step tasks. We've got server lessons. We've got mobile tasks particularly. I'll just search for XML and see if it comes up. How to read in data from an XML file. Okay, so this isn't the one I was thinking of. This is the one I was thinking of, was it was an actual RSS feed, but it uses the XML library to read it. So we can have a look at that as well. And then there's quite a lot of discussion on the forums. So another place, if you haven't joined the forums yet, which is forums.livecode.com, you'll need to sign up. But there's a lot of discussion on here, and lots of our sort of long-term users are quite active on the forums. So if you do have any questions, then it's a great place to go. You'll often get an answer pretty quickly. And when I googled just LiveCode RSS, you can see there's lots of discussion of RSS things on the forums and RevXML there. And so you might get some really good examples. You might get some snippets of code that you can use. So the forums are definitely worth joining. Okay, so JSON libraries. Let's have a look at that, because that is quite a nice, easy one. So if I have a JSON file handy that I can use as an example. I might not. Let's see if I can find a nice file to use as an example. Usually got some lying around. Can't see any obvious ones, but just do a little example here. So I'm just going to do it on a stack. Now, in the dictionary, if you are ever looking for something like this, if you look up JSON, and you'll see that we have a JSON library here, and there's also merg JSON, which is the one that I tend to use. So it gives you JSON to array, which will take a JSON input file and convert it to a LiveCode array, and array to JSON, which goes the other way. So what I'll do is I'll create a very quick little array here so we can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to create a very simple array here just by putting things into it. So I'll put A into a T array 1. Do that for this is a very simple, very simple array, but it can be as complex as you want it to be. You can have be a nested array, so it doesn't have to just be single elements like this. And then what you can do is you can say put array to JSON, and our that's our array, and I'll just put it into field JSON. Save that and apply the script. And then on my stack, I'm just going to add a field that we can put this into. So I'll create a scrolling field here. Set the name of it to JSON. And now if I switch to run mode, then we'll get our JSON there. Now there are a couple of parameters that you can use here. So you give it the array, which is what we've done. You can also give it a root type, which can be an object or a string, and you can tell it to sort of do pretty printing if you want to. So you don't need to give it a root type, but if I set the pretty to true, then it'll just format it a bit nicer for us. And then, of course, here, if we wanted to, we could have a nested array here. And then you'll get your JSON like that. And of course, we don't have to have numerical keys. So this can be top, this can be middle, and this can be bottom. So we now have string keys here. And again, it'll just create that. You'll see that the JSON array is now, that's an object rather than a JSON array like we have here. And then of course the inverse is just array to JSON. So if is JSON to array, sorry. So if your JSON file is storing your sort of local preferences, or maybe it's the result of a call to a web API, or you're using it as a data source, then what you can do is you can do JSON to array. You give it the contents of the JSON file and it'll put it into a LiveCode array for you that you can then work with as an array in LiveCode. Okay, so let's see, what were our other questions? We've done that one, we've done that one. So Gregorio has asked about selecting a row in a data grid to use in another, to use the data from that particular row or column. And he's asked if it's possible to create a LiveCode application for the point of sale. So yes, definitely you could create a point of sale app in LiveCode, whether that's connected to a database or a web service or however you want to do it. That should work fine. But yes, you can create your sort of your front end of your app in LiveCode. I think we're in the process of working on things like barcode scanners and things, so that would be coming as well. If there's any particular features that you're interested in, then let me know and I can find out from the dev team what's planned, sort of coming up for anything that would be useful for that. And Gregorius also asked about adding buttons to the tab panel. So I'm guessing that what you mean by that, let's create another stack here, is our tab panel. Where is it here? Where are the tab buttons? There. So for example, a tab panel like this in your stack. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Let me just shrink this a bit. So you can see here that there's one tab per line, and the actual property name of this, if I hover over it, is just text. So we can add more tabs just by adding to the property here, or we could do that in code as well. So you can set that property. So we can change this to A, B, C, for example. So that's our tabs. Now what you need to do is you need to do some work to get things that, to get different sets of controls on your different panels. So for example, if on our A panel we have a field and a button. Now, although we're on the A panel here and we've added these, then changing the panel doesn't do anything, because all it does is sort of like it's a type of button. It's kind of like a menu. So you actually need to do the work to make things change. So what we'll do is we'll group these two together. So I've just selected both of these controls. I click the group button, which creates a group here. And I'm going to call this group A. Let's make it nice and easy. And then what we need to do is we need to add some code to the tab panel itself. So if I open up the object script for the tab panel, you'll see these are all the sort of standard ones that we can use. And I think the one that we want to use is, which one is it? Menu pick. So that's the message that is sent when you, it's the same as if you're using a drop-down menu like this. It'll send you a menu pick message when the user picks an option. So you're given the chosen item, which is the one that's currently selected, and the previous tab, which is the one you used to be on, so you can do whatever you need to in that case. So in this case, what we can do is we can say if p chosen is A, then we want to show group A. Otherwise, we want to hide group A. This is very simple, but we'll look a bit more in a second. So now, if I go back to run mode, if I go to B, oh, I called it group A, didn't I? Not just A. Let's try now. So now if I choose C, you'll see that group A is hidden, but if I go back to A, it's shown. So what we would need to do is we would set up a group for each of our tabs. So let's make this one look slightly differently. Let's have some radio buttons on group B. Again, we'll group these together using our group button, and I'll call this one group B. And then similarly, we want a group C. So I don't know what will I put on here. Let's have a checkbox. It's just so that we can obviously see that these are different groups. Let's group these two together, and this will be group C. Now we've got our 3 groups, one for each tab. We need to do a bit more work in here. So what we can do is, we know what the previous tab was, so it'll be A, B, or C. So what we can do is we can work out what the name of that group should be, just because I've named them sort of consistently. So what we can do is we can put group and P previous tab into, put this into a variable, so I'll call this previous group. And then similarly for our chosen group, it's group, and in this case it's chosen item into T chosen group. And then what we can do is we can just hide the previous group. So we say hide group T previous group, and we show group chosen group. And I don't need this anymore. This should now hide whichever one we were currently looking at and show the new one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually make all these invisible. So we go to A, we should see group A, then B, then C. And that works because I named those consistently. If you hadn't named them in a way where you could work out the name of the group like this, you just have to do it more manually. You would just have to say hide group A, hide group B, hide group C, etc. And this is one of the cases where actually what we might want to do is we might want to put a lock screen in here. So if you are updating lots of things on the screen, these are obviously very small groups, so it's not particularly obvious what you're doing. But if you had very large groups, lots of controls, and you were changing the position or the visibility or the look of lots of controls at once, what you might want to do is lock the screen, and that prevents any screen updates. Then you make all the changes to the UI that you want, then you unlock the screen, and all those changes are applied at once, so you get a sort of seamless transition, where if you don't lock the screen, all the controls would be the user would be able to see them all being hidden and resized and whatever else you're doing. So it might look a bit messy. So lock screen is a nice way to get nice, clean transitions on your stack. So that is how you use tab panels. I hope that answers your question, Gregorio. They are not particularly obvious. It feels like you should be able to just drag out a tab panel, go to tab A, do some add controls, go to tab B, but you do have to do a little bit of work to get those working. And then he's also asked why each time I resize a card do all the other cards resize. So that is because cards have the same size as the stack. So whatever size your stack is, all the cards will be the same size. So if I add some more cards here, object menu and new card. So the cards are always the same size as the stack. What you would need to do if you wanted your cards to have different sizes is you would need to add code for each card. So let's see, so for card 1, what we do, we would say on pre-open card. So pre-open card is a message that is sent when the user goes to a card, but before the card is made visible. So you can make any changes to how the card looks in here, and they'll be invisible to the user. After pre-open card, you get an open card message, and the open card message is sent after the card has been made visible. So any changes you make in there would be visible to the user. And what I mean by visible to the user is you'll see them happening. Whereas in pre-open card, all the changes will be made and then they'll see the card. If you use open card, they see the card, then you make the changes and those are visible while they're happening and then they see it. So we would do this on pre-open card. So we would set, for example, let's just change the height. So on this card, we would set the height of, what we need to do is we need to set the height of the actual whole stack. You can see this if we actually look at the property inspector. So if I open up the stack inspector and we go to the sort of size and position pane, you'll see that you can change the width and height of the stack. But if we look at the card inspector, those are grayed out. So you can't actually change those on here because they are inherited from the stack. So if you want to change the size, you have to set the height of the stack. So in this case, we'll set it to whatever it currently is, which is 597. So let's just make that 600. And apply that, and then I'm just going to copy this. We will use the view menu to go to the next card. And in this case, we will add to our card script here, and let's set this to 400. And then the same for the next one, again, using the view menu, go next, open up the card script, give it a pre-open card handler, and this one will make 200. So now what will happen is when you go to the card, the height will be changed and then the user will see it. So we should be able to see this just using the view menu. So if we go first, it won't change because it was pretty much what it was before. Go next, see it changes. Go next, it gets smaller again. Go first, it resizes to the original size. So if you want your cards to have different sizes, you'll need to add some code to the pre-open card handler, and you'll actually have to adjust the size of the stack itself. So hopefully that will give you what you need. Oh, sorry, somebody's asked if I can enlarge the text of the field. Is that of my script editor? I can turn that up a bit. It's in the preferences. Had to think for a second there. I'll turn this up. If that's not what you meant, then let me know and I will change it. Just going to have a look and see if there's any comments on what we've been talking about. So Devin's asked, so all the objects are on the same card in the hierarchy. So yes, if we're talking about the groups for our tabs, then yes, they are. So if I open up the project browser, we can use this to have a look at the actual hierarchy. So this is Untitled 2 we're looking at now. There's our card. So you'll see the groups are on the same level And then the controls are inside the groups, but kind of on the same level. So these are all on the same card. So in terms of the hierarchy of the card, it's all these controls, then it's the groups, then it's the card, then it's the stack. So you can see in the project browser kind of how they're laid out and how the sort of inheritance would work. Another way that you could do tab panels is you could have them go to completely different cards. That might work better for you. If you've got a lot of controls in each tab, then it might make sense to actually have a separate card for each one. And since we have 3 cards already, then let's rename these, just so I can show you another way that you could do this. So I'll call this card A. This card B. This card C. Then in our menu pick handler, so let's open up the object script again. Instead of showing and hiding groups, we would put card and P chosen item into T next card, and then we'd just go to card, T next card. That would actually take us to the other card with the other controls on it. One thing that we would need to make sure of there is that we actually have our tab menu, because that actually belongs to card 1. So that's on the first card. We would need to make sure that we had a tab button on each one. Now, this is a slightly more advanced concept, but it might be useful, is that one way that we can make that work, and rather than having to recreate the control each time, is we can put it into a group, and then in the group options here, you can make it into a shared group, and this means that it will be shared, it can be shared on different cards. So now, so let's give this a name so it's easier to refer to. We'll call the group tab panel. And the way that we can place it on different cards is we would go to our second card, and in the message box, you would do place group tab panel of card A onto this card, and then the same for card C. And so this is now actually a shared control. So this is actually the same control on all the, so you can see, if I close that, you can see that when we're switching, we can see that we're changing cards because the size of the stack is changing. And the nice thing about this is, because this is now a shared control, this is actually the same control shared on all the cards. So if I make a change here, for example, if I add tab D, then when we go to the other card, you'll see that it has been updated. So this is one way that you can actually share controls between different cards. You want to be careful when you use it, because it can get a bit confusing, and if you actually want it to appear differently on different cards, then you would need to start writing code to change it. But for things that appear on all your, on multiple cards where you want it to behave exactly the same way, then a shared group is a really is a good way of doing that. Some of the sort of common ones that you might turn into shared controls are things like some of our widgets, so header bars, particularly sort of navigation. If you're making a mobile app, there's a good chance that your navigation bar will actually be on multiple screens, and it will do exactly the same thing because it's probably just going to switch you between cards to do different things. So that's a prime example for a background group. What you could do is you could group these together, give it a name like navigation, and then you could place this on all of your cards, and it would mean that if you make a change, it appears everywhere. If you change the code, it appears everywhere. minimizing the amount of work you have to do and also minimizing the chance of there being sort of small errors and things if you're actually repeating code. Okay, great. So I think that's covered those questions. We don't have any more questions about that. So let's have a look at some of the other questions. Oh, sorry, Gregorio had asked about data grids as well. So we will have a quick look at that. Now, does my data grid example from before, is that going to cover what we need? Let me just open it up here. Okay, so here's our data grid example from the second Q&A, I think. I think it was the second one. So there's a few ways that you can get the information about the selected row. And again, I'll just point you to the lessons because those are, I think, the best way to get the information for the data grids. It is all in the dictionary as well, but the lessons are just really nice. They've got some nice screenshots and things that make everything a little bit easier. So if we go to our LiveCode data grid lessons, there should be a lesson on exactly this. So here we go. How do I get the data associated with a row or column? So in this case, we're interested in the row data. And so there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can use, I think the best way is probably using the highlighted line. So what we can do is I'll just add a button on here that we'll put our code into. We'll call this get data, maybe get row data. And we'll just add the code to our button script. And so on mouse up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the highlighted line. So that will be the number of the highlighted line. I'm just going to put it into a variable to work with. So it's the DG highlighted line of group. And this is called data grid. Just double checking. And I'll put that into T line. And then if we have a look at the lesson here, this is the line that we want. So then what we do is we put the DG data of line, and it will be T line, in this case of group data grid, into the data A. And this will be an array because it's a row of data. So I'll put a breakpoint on here so we can see what's happening. So we're on this line here. So first we get the highlighted line, and that goes into our T line variable. So it's line 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we get the DG data of line 3 of group data grid. That goes into the data A, which if you can see down here at the bottom, let me see if I can bring this up a bit. So it's an array with the address, the name, and the phone number that go with this row. So that gives us the data associated with that row. And then just Gregorio's got a follow-up here. Okay, so if you want to get a particular piece of information, once you've got your information into the array there, what you can do is you can just, for example, I'll just use the answer dialog to show. So it's the data A, and if we wanted the address, you can just reference it as an element in the array, and it'll pop up with the address. Now, if you want to do, if you want to summarize everything in a row, then there's a few ways you could do it. You could get the whole DG data of the data grid, and then you can loop across and you can extract the particular all the values that you want. Let's have a look and see if there's something particularly about columns in here. Okay, so the example here is giving you a particular column from the selected row. If you wanted to get all the prices, for example, and do an average of prices or something, I think you would need to get the DG data, which would give you the full array that represents all this data, loop through it, make a list of all the prices or whatever it was, and then do your calculation, your calculation on that. There isn't a sort of built-in way to average a column or anything like that, at least as far as I know. But I will have a look at that and see if there is like a really efficient way to do that rather than just looping. But I think you probably do just need to loop over all the elements in the DG data array and do your calculation. Okay, so just scrolling down to have a look at some of the other questions that we got. Also, David had asked about building an app that parses an RSS feed. So I think it's a bit more complicated to talk through in lesson, but we did find that lesson here, which is, so RSS feeds are their XML data, and we do have an XML library. So in the dictionary, if I just search for XML, there's our XML library. And I think what we want to, so we start by creating a tree. So here we would start with rev XML create tree. I don't know if everybody knows, but LiveCode used to be called run rev, which is why lots of our things begin with rev. That was our sort of standard way of showing that something is a function that belongs to the engine. So that's why it's rev, in case anybody was wondering. So you create your XML tree with your XML text, which could come from a file or an RSS feed or a web source. There's some parameters that you pass in here. Then that gives you a numerical sort of ID for the tree. And then you parse through the tree by doing things like rev XML child names. You pass it the tree ID, so that's the ID that you got from the previous function, the rev XML create tree, start node, name delimiter, etc. So you would write a function using the XML library to parse your RSS feed. I will see if I can dig out the example that was particularly about RSS feeds. I really don't know where it's gone. There definitely was one, because I think that'll probably be the most useful thing for you. But if that doesn't exist anymore, then yes, how to read in data from an XML file. And actually, I think this lesson here as well, the accessing web services using LiveCode, this does cover some of the same things. So again, in here, where this is reading the preferences to an XML tree. So this is actually using a web service, and then it's parsing the information that comes back, which is XML, into a tree, and then outputting it. So these two lessons together should be quite a useful one to look at. Okay, so let's have a look and see what else is in here. So we've done the data grid, tab panels, resizing cards, RSS feeds, JSON. Is there any LiveCode environment development for iPad OS planned? So in the sense that that's something that we would like to do, yes, in the sense of planned as in planned, then as far as I know, not at the moment. I know it's something that the dev team would love us to be able to do, so that you can actually write LiveCode apps on an iPad. But at the moment, I think that's probably, for all that we would love to do it, it's probably fairly far down the line at the moment. Oh, and Bill has actually found a nice lesson for writing a function to do totaling, or to calculate totals on a data grid. So perfect. I wasn't even sure that that lesson was there. But once again, our data grid lessons come through. And then Lonnie has a question about the syntax to set a path on a server app. Let me have a quick look. The server is not my particular area of expertise, so I probably struggle to answer that. But let me have a look and see. Okay, so Lonnie, I'm sorry, but I can't answer that off the top of my head. I think that you may have already, we have sent in a question via Heather, and I think somebody on the dev team is having a look. But off the top of my head, I'm afraid I don't know the syntax to set a path on a server app. It may be that there is a lesson on it in our server lessons, if you haven't already looked there. So we do have how to do LiveCode server tasks. I don't know how many people have actually done anything with LiveCode server, but it is there. It does exist. There's not a lot of lessons on here. There may be something useful in there, and I will try and find out the answer for you. And if you have sent an email into support, then Heather will probably get back to you that way. Otherwise, we can talk about it a bit next week. Right, so was there another question that I was going to answer? Let me just have a quick scroll. Okay, so I think we've done all the questions that have been posted so far. If you do have any other ones, just post them in there. And in the meantime, we've got about 20 minutes left. So there were a few things that I thought we could talk about that might be useful. So I had thought about talking about sort of general messages and how they work and how they pass up the message path. We briefly talked about the pre-open card and open card. So those are really useful. There's also pre-open stack and open stack, which are very similar. The pre-open stack is sent when the stack is opened, but before the user sees it, and open stack is sent when the stack is opened, but after the user sees it. So the sort of flow of the messages would be pre-open stack, then pre-open card, then open stack, then open card. So anything on the sort of stack level that you want to do, you would probably do in pre-open stack. The cards, obviously, if you're moving between cards, they each would probably want to do something different. So those would be on the card script. So what else is useful to know? To be honest, I don't know how much sort of LiveCode development you guys have all been doing. So some of these might be a bit too simple. But I was just going to have a quick look at some of the sort of the basic controls and the things that you can do with them. But Gregorio has asked, is it possible to bring MS Excel table? So you could use a data grid or a table field to display that. I think probably what you would want to do is you'd want to export the Excel data as probably tab separated values or potentially comma separated values. LiveCode would probably handle those better than, I mean, if you copy and paste also from an Excel sheet, that should work fine. It depends how you want to import it in, but certainly with tab separated data or comma separated data, you can put it straight into tab field, or well, with a data grid, it would have to be tab separated values if you're putting it straight in. But yes, you can definitely work with that. And then what you can do is you can export it back out of LiveCode as tab separated or comma separated values, which you could then open in Excel as well. So Bill has said related to writing for iPad, isn't that what compile for iOS is? So Sorry, but I may have misunderstood your question, because this is something that we have been asked before, which was that people wanted the option to install LiveCode, the development environment, on an iPad and write apps on the iPad, not just run them on the iPad. So if you, at the moment, if you build your app on Windows, Mac, or Linux desktop, and then you export it as an app, then yes, you can absolutely run them on the iPad. If I open up, there's our dice roller example from before. So in the standalone application settings in iOS, you can choose to do just for iPad, to do iPod and iPhone, or iPod, iPhone and iPad, and that will create you an app that you can run on an iPad. But in terms of running the IDE on an iPad and being able to create your apps on the iPad and then save them as standalones, then that's something that we would love to be able to do, but is not in the sort of immediate plan at the moment. So yeah, it's the difference between like creating apps for the iPad or creating apps on the iPad. One you can do at the moment, one you unfortunately can't. Okay, and then Lonnie's also asked about the difference between compiling for HTML5 and developing in LiveCode server. So I guess the main difference is that with an HTML5 app, you build your HTML5 app and you run it in a sort of, I guess, a player, like Flash Player or something on your website. And the server is slightly different, because for the server you can actually, and if you're using an HTML app, you would probably put some HTML and around your app on the web page to make it all look nice. Whereas developing on server, you're actually writing the code, but it's live code, so it's more like where you might use PHP, but you can use LiveCode script instead. So if I was to build this, for example, this app here, if I was to build this into an HTML5 app, which I'm not going to try at the moment because I'm not sure if it'll work or not, but then what it would create is it would create a sort of, and then if I then deployed this as an HTML5 app, it would appear sort of in the middle of the web page. You'd be able to use it just like you can use it here. But that's it. It's just a sort of atomic thing that's on your web page that's run using sort of HTML5 player. Whereas server development is more like server development. So if we have a look at some of the lessons, if I can bring that back up. So like some of the examples here, let's have a look at how to upload a file with LiveCode server. Then you'll see that actually what you're doing, so when you get down here, here's our little bit of LiveCode server script. So this is actually a bit of LiveCode script that is running in the server in the same way that you could put some PHP here. So this is actually executable code. So they're quite different, and you'd probably use them for different things. It really depends what you want from your app and what you want it to be able to do, whether you would do an HTML5 app or whether you would use LiveCode server. And then Bill's found some, yes, it's a sort of a third-party library, an Excel library. So that would give you a lot more sort of flexibility and a lot more power with Excel. And I'd actually hadn't, did I know about that? I might have known about that. There's a few things on the third-party, the sort of third-party store that are there. There's some things for doing charts, which are quite nice, things like that. So actually, if that's something that people don't know about, we do have a store where you can get some third-party sort of extensions to LiveCode. So How do I find it? So if we go to the store here, just in case this is something that people don't know, then there's some extensions that you can buy. So there's conference streaming, there's things like that. Then there's extensions and widgets. So this is where we'd find these types of extensions. Sorry, my home internet's a little slow, I think probably because it's trying to run Webinar Jam at the same time as I'm asking it to go to the LiveCode store. So yeah, so here there's some pie charts, there's a calendar, there's the Excel library that Bill found. So there's quite a few things on here that you might find interesting. That's where you can go and have a look. There's not a lot of stuff up there at the moment, but there are some quite useful things. WordLib is similar to the Excel library. It lets you work with Microsoft Word documents and LiveCode, things like that. So yeah, worth having a look at if you're looking to see if there's something already done for things that you might need. Okay, so I think there was another question. Let me see if I can. So Lonnie's asked about a workaround for able to develop on iOS on the Windows environment, and unfortunately there's not really, because you need Xcode, and Xcode doesn't run on Windows. There are some services, things, I think there's one called Mac in Cloud. There's other services like that where you can pay a monthly fee to have access to a Mac in the cloud. That might be something that you'd be interested in, but in terms of having it running on your machine, unless you want to install a virtual machine or something like that so that you can run Mac on your Windows machine, it comes down to the fact that you need Xcode, and it doesn't exist for Windows. So I think if you are wanting to write iOS apps and you have a Windows machine, then probably looking at one of the services that sort of provide a cloud Mac. I think there's quite a few of them about. I haven't used any of them personally because I have a Mac here, but I know that there are quite a few services like that that you might find interesting. Okay, and then Gregorius asked about using the right mouse click to show a menu. So that's something that you definitely can do. I feel like I was in the middle of about to show you something and then we got a question and I can't remember what it was, but it'll come back to me, or if anybody remembers, just pop it into the chat. So yeah, so a menu. So what we would do is we would create our menu. What type do I want to use? Probably pull down. Nope, I think it was not what I wanted in the first place. So we can create our option menu, and then let's put some. Let's just give this ABC. This is something I haven't done for a while, so hopefully I will remember how to do it. So let's create a label field. Let's add some code to it. So we will do a mouse up or mouse down, depends where you want to do it. If you want to do it on mouse down, yes, the mouse down for a menu. And then we want to, in this case, we care about what button number we're using. So we can say if p button number is 3, and I think that's right. Let's double check in the dictionary. Mouse down, button number 1 is left, 2 is middle, 3 is right, so it was 3. Then what we can do is we can say pop up button, let's give this a name. Call it menu, that's a little bit simpler. We can say pop up menu at the mouse lock. So the mouse lock is the location of the mouse. We go into run mode. If I right click on here, button number there, typo. Then when I right click, it pops up, and then I can choose my option. And what I can do is I can come to my menu, can edit the script here on menu pick. Let's get into the habit of adding it from here, because then it gives us the items. And just to show that it's working, we can answer p chosen item. And also what I can do is I can make this invisible, so it's not there. It won't be shown at the moment, but when it pops up, it will be shown. And you can see that those options are being selected. So that is that's how you can create a pop-up menu. So hopefully that that covers what you need. Obviously, and we wouldn't just answer the chosen item in there. You would do whatever you need to there. Oh, Kelly's. That's interesting, Kelly, that there's a rumor that Apple might announce Xcode on the iPad, which, yeah, that would be quite interesting. And again, that would probably make the idea of having a LiveCode IDE on the iPad more interesting as well, because then you would probably be able, that would make it easier to actually create things on the iPad. And then Bill has mentioned the same question as Peter about saving. So closing a window doesn't close it, you would have to save it. So for example, I can show you this, probably the best way is with the project browser. So if I open up the project browser again, so this stack is untitled 4. If I close it, save it, okay, save it, then you can see that it's still in memory. It's not actually closed, it's still there. Where I can't remember where I saved that to, but wherever I saved that to, which I should be able to find out if I put the file in the stack. Okay, so it's on the desktop in my LC icons folder. That must have been the last folder that I was working in. So that is now where the where your stack is closed, is saved on the system. So that's the actual file for your stack. So when you save, when you Control S or File Save, that will save your stack. So that's actually updating the saved file. Now, when I just close it, it's still in memory. It's not been removed from memory. It's still right there, and we can open it up again. So closing a stack doesn't take it out of memory. If you want to remove it from memory, what you want to do is you want to say close and remove from memory. I did that just by right-clicking there. So now it's not in memory anymore. So now, if you needed to open it, you would have to open it from the file menu again, and then it's back in memory. If you always want your stacks to be closed and removed from memory when you close them here, then there is a property of the stack, which is purge stack on close and purge window on close. If you've got those turned on, so this is in the stack inspector, so these are stack properties, then I think this is right. When you close it, now I feel like that should have worked, and it could just be that the project browser has not updated. Yeah, so the project browser didn't update there, unfortunately, but you can see that it has now been removed from memory. So again, if I want to reopen it, I would have to do it from the file menu. So most of the time, if you just close a stack here, it's still in memory. It's still in the LiveCode memory, unless you set these properties. So yeah, if you want to save, use the keyboard shortcut, use file save, that'll always save it. If you then close it, or you remove it from memory, or you shut down LiveCode, it will sometimes ask you if you want to save, even if you think that you shouldn't need to save because you have saved. Like I say, that's just a bit of a quirk in LiveCode where it's asking you that when sometimes it doesn't need to. yeah, closing a window doesn't close it. It's like sort of anything or lots of things. If I close Chrome, it's not closed. It's still there. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, it's not really closed. It's just like minimized, I guess, is the closest thing. So yeah, if you want to remove things, it's close and remove from memory, or you set those properties on the stack and then they're always completely removed when you just click on the close button there. Okay, so we are just about out of time. Also, a quick one. So Devin said, pop-up menu, once invisible, how can I select it? So you can, there's multiple ways that you can do it. Think, yes, this is the right card. So we can use the project browser, and we can use the little eye icon to turn it on again. You can use the view menu, and you can show invisible objects. So that doesn't actually change its properties. It just shows it to you, and then you can turn off show invisible object, and you could do it in the message box. So you can say show menu, or you could hide button menu. So multiple ways to do it, whichever one sort of suits you the best, whichever works best with your workflow. Equally, even though it's invisible, if you want to, you can still edit the script of button. So I can right here edit the script of button menu. It'll still open up. It's just invisible. So yeah, multiple ways that you can work with invisible controls. Okay, so hopefully there was some useful stuff in there for everybody. I'll do my best to write up some slides for you with some of the things that we covered. Probably won't be until the start of next week, because luckily enough, tomorrow is a public holiday here, so I will be off. So I will get those slides written up and get your questions ready for next time. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that was useful, everybody. Okay, thanks everybody. Goodbye, have a nice evening.